The biggest deficits in our pre-adoption education revolved around what our kids' birth mothers might have been experiencing. For example, we didn't know the severity of trauma for women who placed their babies for adoption, even in open adoption.
It was hard, but at the same time, I just tried to block it out because it was too hard thinking about the fact that I made this decision and I made it for all the right reasons. But it was still really hard to admit that, I went through this pregnancy and I had this baby and then I don't have this baby.
I cried. The hours after the baby was gone, I cried. I just laid there and cried. I knew that my decision was the right decision. But over the years, you have moments where you're like, did I do the right thing? Did I make the right choice? It doesn't matter how amazing the adopted parents are whatsoever. You still question yourself and why did I do this? And, am I going to go to hell for it? There's so many things that go around in your head, on a constant basis. I mean, even now at my age now, I still sit there and go, am I going to have to stand at the pearly gates and be treated bad by God because I, made decisions in my life, or you don't know.
We didn't know that birth mothers who had pre-existing mental health issues or past trauma had even more difficult time after placement.
I didn't really have much of goals. I mean, I was really lost back then. I'd had a really rough childhood and didn't really know what I was going to do in life. Between, my first son and what happened with him and then having to go through that, I just went on this, just rampage of not even caring anymore for, a long time. It just tore me. It destroyed me. I knew I'd done the right thing. I knew that she was in a great place that I couldn't possibly ever. I had 4 children after I had Sky because of my emotional instability, because of my inability to pick the right mate, I guess. I've always, I know now at this age, and knowing what I know now, that my choices in men were all based upon, my male figures that I had as a kid. My own dad left when I was 2 months old, and I never knew him until I tracked him down. I think around the time that I was pregnant with Sky, and that has a really big effect on a female. When it comes to picking a mate. All of my children's dads just left me stranded. It was just crazy because it's the same thing that my own dad did to me. So it's like I was pre-choosing someone that was going to do that to me. What led to my kids being taken into foster care is I was emotionally distraught still after Sky's adoption and stuff. I had still not had any help. I was still struggling with depression. I was still I was having children back to back and going through it from one postpartum depression to another without being cured from one, plus, now I know that, there's depression that runs in my family as well that I had that I didn't know I had. And, I just I think I got to a point where, everything was going wrong. My car, it's just one of those times where your car breaks down and you're told you're going to be kicked out of your house and you lose your job. And then I just completely just fell apart.
For me, going to Sunset Beach, it's not as hard now because we've had so much fun there, and got to connect so much more and share a lot more joy. And the heartache isn't as hard when we share it and walk through it. But the first time was terrible. And I just remember I just ached inside because I knew the story of her living there from her. My sister shared with me, that's where she had become pregnant, or I don't know, if that's where she was living, but that's where she was when she had Journey. And That's what she was when she lost Gertie. And it made me really sad too. I could feel her, and then to see the actual places, just being there, knowing that she had been there and what she was going through, and that's how it. I don't think it would hurt as bad if there was more healing for her.
Yeah.
It's not that way, and it's really painful.
We didn't know that some expectant mothers receive very little counseling from the agencies that are hired by the prospective adoptive parents, and that counselors are quick to drop their clients after placement.
And like afterwards, you're just plopped out on the street and that's it. The counselors all of a sudden disappear and you're left to deal with your emotions on your own and stuff, pretty much.
I don't remember really getting any contact with a lot of anybody other than the Falcos.
You're having a baby and you're coming out with postpartum depression, and that's extreme in itself, because there's women that have freaking committed murders from postpartum depression, and you're just like going out on the street with this like pain, and nobody talks to you about it. They don't tell you what you're to expect, and if you're already struggling with depression from a childhood or whatever, that's triple. I mean, that could kill people. I'm lucky to be alive.
I was really stubborn and said I didn't need any counseling because I had a really good support system at home, and that was not a lie. I did have a really good support system all the way through from beginning to end. But they didn't tell me that it could be as heart-wrenching or as hard as it was. That was never brought to my attention, that it could be as bad in a good way as it was. And through counseling now, many years later, I'm remembering bits and pieces of things that I did not want to remember, and parts of them that I didn't even know were real things, because I just had blocked everything out. Hard, but finally finding out that you're bipolar at 50 years of age has helped to understand a lot of things as well. So it makes it so I can focus and I can concentrate on why I didn't always remember why I made some of the decisions that I made. Not that bipolar is the excuse, or that gives me any right to be able to do any of the things that I said or done, but it helps to understand why I had blocked out a lot of things and why I had so many highs and lows and not really a lull in between. It was either way up or way down. There was no in the middle. I was always just told it was because I was depressed and I just needed to take another pill. And that just wasn't the thing. And so you don't get to be who you are and enjoy the parts of life when you block things out. You miss things. And then sometimes it's, a good thing that you miss. I think it's very important that people going through this go through counseling and a professional, not just a friend that they can talk to. I mean, that's great. To have a wonderful support system is also great. But man, don't hold back on that counseling. That's what they're there for. That's what they've got training for, is to help us be able to get through the processes that we have to go through and the steps, because there's always going to be another step, because that child doesn't ever not be there. Whether it's a birthday or a christening or a graduation or a wedding, that doesn't ever stop. So you have to figure out how to deal with those and be a better person during that to make it easy for that child, because that child didn't ask for any of this to happen. This is just what we chose.
Afterwards, I just had a lot of stuff go wrong. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about life. I ended up pregnant and having to go through the whole thing again and give up my kids for adoption. I just didn't seem to be able to grasp life well. I just felt like no matter what I did, I felt like I couldn't get a grip on life and do anything right. Birth mom's emotions, as far as after the birth and stuff like that should be the responsibility of these companies that are sitting there and getting their money and getting your child, and they should have that responsibility put on them. It's like they're the ones that are angling you towards adoption. They're the ones that are angling, taking people's money. So if they can afford all that, then how come they can't afford to take care of the birth mom after the fact?
We didn't know that some women are pressured into placing their children for adoption when what they desire are the resources to be able to parent their children.
When I said there should be places for women to turn to if they have nowhere to go, there should be like some kind of system set up, something somewhere where if a girl comes in pregnant or a girl has kids and like needs help, her first choice shouldn't have to be to give her children up. Like there's nothing wrong with a person being a parent. Like just because you're down on your luck at one moment doesn't mean you can't rise up and be a good parent and stuff. I was a great parent. Like, my problem was I had nowhere to turn and nobody to turn to and nothing I could do to help myself at the moment. When a woman walks into a building where pregnant and with nobody to turn to, instead of like immediately being whisked over to adoption, they should offer her resources. They should offer her try to help her find a place to live, like try to find anybody to help her, instead of that being her immediate desperate decision of I've got to give my child up for adoption because I have no one and nothing, and be in a calm, good place to be able to make that decision instead of a desperate place to make the decision.
We didn't know how often a birth mother might self-medicate with drugs and alcohol to ease her pain or to simply cope with her choice.
I drank a lot, an awful lot. I needed to not feel. So I made really poor choices. And I didn't stay in great relationships because I didn't think I deserved them. It was a really tough time for several years. Because I just couldn't figure out how to get my poop in a pile. As much as I knew what I did was right, it was very wrong. And you can't put that into words. You just can't. You have to, in all honesty, you just have to experience it to be able to really understand it, because you understand the loss of a parent. You understand the loss of a loved one in general, but you can never understand the loss of a child. And even though she's not gone, she was still gone. And the open communication was wonderful, but at the same time, it was like every time that happened, you were ripping that Band-Aid off all over again.
Probably my aim was to like not look like I'd been pregnant, just to not hurt and stuff. I think I probably just went forward with life just like partying and drinking probably, and like trying to forget everything. And I think the biggest thing is like I felt like I couldn't face her because I was so humiliated. Is not the right word. I'm not humiliated. I wasn't humiliated. I felt like I would be a disappointment maybe.
We didn't recognize how critical it is for an expectant mother to have her own independent attorney and advocate, because the trauma of placement often interferes with her ability to adequately comprehend her legal rights and responsibilities.
I believe she told me all of the things that I needed to know, or at least should know. They were, open about the fact that even after the baby left, you have a certain amount of time that you can renege on that, or change your mind, however you want to look at it. And that because Dean and I were legally married, he would have to sign papers, even though he wasn't the biological father. He was still going to have to sign because that's Nebraska's laws. Dean graciously signed the papers and didn't make it an issue, but I don't know that she really explained all of that to us as well as she probably could have. I learned probably more of that from Rebecca Falco because of her being an attorney and knowing a little bit more of the ins and outs than the attorney that we had in Nebraska.
I'm pretty sure that
Balcos were the only ones represented, because I don't remember much about that other side of things. I don't remember any attorneys, but Phoebe, we went through all of that with all the initial meetings, and I knew it was expected. I just didn't know how hard it was going to be to write my name.
It was never suggested to us that our presence and connection to an expectant mother might put undue pressure on her to place her baby with us.
I never second guessed what I was doing for numerous reasons. But the biggest one was I could never hurt somebody the way that I know that they've been hurt before. I don't think it was hard having the Falcos around after Emily was born, because I had in the back of my mind from get-go that the Falcos needed to have that bonding time that any other mother and father would in the hospital time frame up until then. After is as much of a normal having a child should be.
There are advantages on both sides to knowing, trusting, and loving each other before the baby arrives. I don't have a resolution for this issue, but I now understand the concern that the new mother cannot make an unbiased decision.
We didn't know that sometimes an expectant parent chooses adoptive parents for her child based on what she's missed out on.
So I knew it was going to be a good fit, because that is what I wanted. You know, the focus on the child, you know, the constant learning and growing and teaching, that's very important. You know, I didn't have that. So it was all there. You know, you'd look at it, yeah, everything that I wanted as a kid and what.
One young birth mother said to me several months after her adoption placement, I wanted them to adopt me.
We didn't know that birth parents often feel isolated and alone in their experience because other birth parents also hide their status. We didn't know support groups for birth parents were so few and far between.
Talk to somebody. There are people out there that will understand and that can have your back and that can help you through, whether it's today, next week, next month, or 10 years down the road. That's what support groups are for. You need a support group for this, just like you need a support group for NA or AA. It's the same hurt and trauma, you just for different reasons. I do believe if I had not been stubborn and went through with counseling and had other mothers that have been in my shoes, I don't think it would have been as much of a struggle as it was. Because we all have our own stories. We all have our own reasonings for going through what we ended up going through. And to have somebody that knew what that was like to share that with probably would have been so much easier.
We didn't know the shame and guilt that many birth parents experience when they have subsequent children that they keep, even if the child they placed understands the changed circumstances.
When I got pregnant again with my other kids, what scared me the most was how it was going to affect my firstborn. That's what hurt me the most. Because I instantly went, how is KJ going to feel growing up? How is the relationship going to be? What's he going to think of me? What, is he going to... I have never cried telling this out, ever, when I say these things. But that was my first thought when I found out I was pregnant. And then when I had twins, the emotion was even worse. Because here and now I'm going to raise two kids with the same father in a different time, but yet still very young. I felt stuck because he was my first boyfriend, first everything, and our first child. In my mind, everything should have worked out. We went through a heck of a tough time. And in my head, it was like we should have stayed together, but that didn't happen. So then raising kids, it was harder because it was like, I have 3. Should I have kept them? Should I have had any more kids? Like the emotions are just raw and real all the time when you're thinking of those things.
I don't really think I had any feelings one way or the other about the other kids she had. I think that it was talked about really well in my adoptive family, the Falco family, that there was a genuine understanding about, this is the reason you needed to be adopted, and she's now older, and so I feel like there was never really a hiccup there.
So I had remarried, and we had decided we wanted to try and have a child. And we ended up getting pregnant, and that was after 2 miscarriages. It was rough. When we first found out, it brought a lot of heart wrenching, because I thought, here I am having another child, which I didn't think would probably ever happen for me, just because of the situation where the last child I had, I gave up for adoption. But you don't want them to think that you gave them up and then you keep the next one because you didn't want them or you didn't care about them. That makes it really hard. And I was in what I thought was a really wonderful marriage at the time. It made it, I guess, made it okay. Not that it was easier. It made me realize that I could never go through that again.
I found out Rochelle was pregnant with Chris. I think I was still young enough that it didn't really matter. Like, I got a new sibling, but I didn't really care. And the point of like, oh, she had somebody else after me, it was more along the lines of like, that's the way of life. I mean, I don't think we really had a conversation regarding Christopher that I can remember. I think it was mostly she was just glad she was able to continue the pregnancy with Chris, because it was a hard pregnancy for her. And I think that's where my sympathy, not really mad about it, was that was a difficult pregnancy for her, and she was able to have another kid, and he survived.
I didn't really have any feelings, like negative feelings towards that, because keeping my siblings after me, the reason that I was given up for adoption is that she wasn't quite ready yet to be a mom. But I guess I didn't really have any negative feelings, because I thought maybe she thought she was ready at that point. So I guess my feelings were not negative towards her at all or anything like that.